Hello, welcome to Carnell Knowledge. My name is Tom Carnell. It is a bright, sunny day here in Bellingham, Washington, and it's a Friday, and so we're going to do our regular show. On this show, I do 3 times a week, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I sort of review, recommend 5 movies, a book, and 5 records. I do a lot of diving into those realms, and like to come away with things that are off the beaten track, things that other people on YouTube and on social media aren't talking about, and that's a lot. So who am I? I'm a guy who was a buyer for Tower Records, Record Factory and Warehouse for about 20 years. I published and wrote Carpa Nocta magazine, which was an international magazine that was available back in the 90s. I wrote for Fangoria and Dread Central for about 15 years, and had a bunch of podcasts, and now I'm an author. There's a bunch of Amazon or books on Amazon. There's some short story collections, some novels, some interview books, and there's going to be more. And that's who I am. And so, like I say, I come on here 3 times a week, share some of the things I've found in my travels, and I think that everyone seems to be responding to it. So we're going to keep doing this. Be sure to watch this video to the end. It helps me with the algorithm. And if you have anything you want to discuss, please make a comment. I get back to you pretty quick. If it's something you want to take offline, or there's something you want me to talk about on the show, email me at tomcarnell@gmail.com. And I think that's it. With that completed, let's get on to the movies. Our first film today is from 1978, directed by Jack Gold. It's called The Medusa Touch. It stars Richard Burton, Lee Remick, and the always fantastic Lino Ventura. It's about a telekinetic novelist. I don't know if telekinetic is the right word. He's more of a precog kind of a guy. Anyway, he causes disasters simply by thinking about them. It's a film very much of its time, late 70s, when things like parapsychology and ESP and all that stuff was really, really big. Burton worked for like 3 weeks on the picture and then got out of there. He went off and did The Wild Geese, the war film, if you know what I'm talking about there. He was paid $500K up front, did his bit, and then hit the bricks. It's from a Peter Greenaway novel. A couple of interesting things I saw. There's a bandaged character after Burton's character is hurt. That's not Richard Burton. It's a stand-in. And it's the second of 2 movies that Burton made in the 70s that had to do with supernatural stuff. It was this and the truly awful Exorcist 2, The Heretic. Interview I read, this is Burton in Burton's prime, and I don't mean his acting prime. He said on this that he was drinking heavily while doing it and smoking, get this, 60 to 100 cigarettes a day. Don't do that, kids. Roger Ebert called this the worst film of 1978. I don't know that I would agree with that, but it's a film that is kind of wacky. Burton mostly scowls through the film. Everyone else, Lee Remick is just acting her ass off on this. I mean, she's trying to do her best amidst all the chaos that must have been going on set. I remember it coming out when I was a kid, and hearing a lot of good things about it. It was like, oh, Richard Burton does genre, and yeah, it's okay. It's worth seeing if it's on and you're folding laundry or that kind of a thing. You don't need to pay a lot of attention to what's being said to follow what's going along. There's a pretty cool destruction of a church at one point towards the end. It's fine. Again, it was one of those things, those titles I remember from my youth, and I was like, oh yeah, I wonder if that it was truly bad as I remember. And it's not, but it's close. Moving on to something that's truly amazing. 1980, directed by the great Italian exploitation director Umberto Lenzi. I'm going to screw this name up. Mangiati Vivi, aka Eaten Alive, stars Robert Kerman, who I'm going to talk about in a second, Janet Agrin, Ivan Razumov, who was in The Man from Deep River, Meme Lay, who's a legend in exploitation cinema, and in a teeny tiny little role, Mel Ferrer. It's about a young woman who works with a mercenary to search for her sister in the jungles of New Guinea. Oh, that's always a good idea. Where they find her living with a cult in an area inhabited by cannibals. This straight up is a third world cannibal film. It's there's lots of the great Chaz Ballin, who is a journalist and a idol of mine, used to call it gut munching, and there's lots of that in spades. A couple of interesting things. Robert Kerman was in Cannibal Holocaust. He was the guy who watches the footage of the team and then goes and tries to find more information. At some point in his career, he worked under the name Arbola and did, for a long time, did porn. And later, as he was trying to do more legitimate roles, that porn career kept coming back and haunting him. And so he was mostly relegated to just dog shit movies like this kind of thing. The main character, the Ivan Razumov character, is completely based on Jim Jones. He does a lot of oratory and a lot of spread arms kind of thing. There are scenes in this movie that I'll tell you right now, if you have an issue with real or faked animal death, you want to steer way clear of this. There was a couple of things in here that were a little tough to sit through. And as it turns out, they were mostly cribbed from other films. There's a crocodile death and a woman being killed and eaten. That was from a film called Sacrifice. Spoiler, Meme Lay's death is something that's taken from a film called The Last Cannibal World. And there is a castration footage of a snake eating a monkey and a man being pulled into the water by a crocodile. That's all taken from a film called Slave of the Cannibal God. Third world cannibal films are an acquired taste. They're the height of exploitation cinema. They can be a rough road to hoe, but I think they're important to mention, and I think they're important to recommend / review, is because they were ever a thing at all. It was a lot of white savior stuff going on. It was a lot of excuses for gratuitous gore, but again, I think that they are something that you need to sort of, if you want to be well-versed in genre and in horror specifically, you want to have at least a working knowledge of this stuff. There's not a lot of it as compared to like Supernatural or some of the other stuff, or especially like Giallo and that kind of thing. But it's an important subgenre, and I feel like I'm justifying my watching this thing. It's an important subgenre, and I think it needs to at least be a couple have been to be considered and to be viewed during what we talked about before, that time in the chair. So enough said about that. Our third film, 1973. This is a sort of a nostalgic thing for me. It's directed by Tom Alderman. It's called The Severed Arm. It stars Deborah Wally, Larry Alexander, Kelly Estelle, and the great comedic actor Marvin Kaplan. It's about, I saw this when I was a kid. I saw it on Bob Wilkins' Creature Features, and I've never forgotten it. And I'll tell you why in just a second. The synopsis: trapped in a cave, 5 men are reduced to cutting the arm off of a companion in order to not starve to death. And here's the funny thing, and this is darkly funny, I'm going to tell you right now. They draw straws. I'm going to spoil this for you. They draw straws. They pick a guy that they're going to kill. He asks for a minute to get his head around it. And while they sort of go to sleep, he tries to bash the head in of someone else, figuring that if I kill this guy, we'll eat him and they won't take my arm. So the guys wake up. The dude just barely glances the rock off his head. They drag him to the ground and they lop his arm off. I swear to you, no sooner do they lop his arm off. They don't even get to eat it. They lop his arm off, and suddenly you hear through the rocks someone calling, like sort of, hello, hello, and they're saved. I find that incredibly funny. I mean, as I say to a friend, all you need is the Price is Right losing horn to play. The rest of the film is after they're all rescued. The members of the guys that were trapped in the cave start dying, being murdered, and it's a film most definitely of its time. Again, 1973. It could have been way more ghoulish, reference our last film, Eaten Alive. But it aired on TV. It wasn't uncut, but it was pretty uncut. So it's not a gory film. It's not a particularly great film, but it's just one, you see those films when you're a kid and they sort of live in your heart for the rest of your life. I have a soft spot in my heart for this film, and it's so weird to see Marvin Kaplan. As soon as you see Marvin Kaplan, or if you look him up, and you hear his voice especially, it'll blow your mind who that guy is. All right, now we're on to something that really is something. 1977, directed by George A. Romero, starring John Amplas, Lincoln Mazel, and Christine Forrest, who later went on to marry and then divorce they got a divorce, George Romero. This is 1977's film Martin. I've been super lucky in my life to have interviewed most of what I call the Romero family, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. Some of them I consider to be friends, and this film has a really special place in my heart. The synopsis, as we say around here, is as follows. A young man who believes himself to be a vampire goes to live with his elderly and hostile cousin in a small Pennsylvania town where he tries to suppress his bloodlust. Yeah, but it's about a lot more. It's one of Romero's favorite films of his own. It's more about delusion. I think it's a film about addiction. I've had long conversations with people at conventions, on panels about Martin's relationship to addiction and abuse. And they never really asked the question, is Martin a vampire or is he not a vampire? On a panel once with Michael Gornick, who was the director of photography, and John Amplas, who starred in the film, we talked a lot about, was he a vampire, was he not a vampire? And I thought it was really interesting that they all had different opinions. We asked them at one point, would it have changed, if you had thought he was a vampire, would it have changed your perspective on the film if you were told he wasn't a vampire? That kind of a dichotomy. I think it's an endlessly fascinating film. I think Amplas just kills it in the role. There is a documentary that you can find on YouTube called Taste the Blood of Martin. It's by David Gregory. I talked about it on another episode of this series. It's great. It's mostly Michael Gornick and John Amplas walking through the town a small Pennsylvania town that they shot it in, and basically going down memory lane, like, remember we shot here, and remember this was an old hardware store, and what have you. And it's fantastic. You can find it pretty readily. If not, go to my Facebook page and sift down the many posts in the timeline. I had a link up there. There's also, if you know where to look on YouTube, there is a film called Wampyr, Wampyr. It's the Italian cut of Martin that you can find. And the music's a little different. By the way, music by Goblin, and it's great. The music's a little different in the Italian cut. The timeline is definitely different. The American version, for example, begins on the train when he attacks a victim. The Italian version isn't. It starts, as I believe, with him and his relative the relative picking him up at the train station and going home, and then later he takes a train trip. So yeah, in the original script, Martin was a lot older, but then Romero saw Amplice in a play, and he decided to rewrite it. I had been told that Romero wanted to make the film in black and white, but the powers that be sort of put the kibosh on that. Originally, there was a voiceover, which if you watch the trailer film, it has a voiceover, and I think it's horrible. It's the second worst voiceover next to the original Blade Runner. Supposedly, there are different versions other than even the Italian and the American version. And reportedly, like originally the film was 4 hours long, and there's no way that was going to fly. But somewhere, they reportedly found a copy of that 4-hour cut, and somebody is cleaning it up and rating it for release. Whether that is going to mean a 4-hour version or or a shorter version, but I'm on pins and needles, no matter how you look at it. Of all of George Romero's films, it's a tough call for me. My heart says Night of the Living Dead, but my brain says Martin as being my favorite of his output. But yeah, it's great. I mean, if any way you can get your mitts on it, it's a fantastic film, and it's very, very subtle. It was made for a dime, and like I say, Amplice just kills it in it. He's so good in it. And Christine Forrest is really good. Tom Savini has a small role in it. Yeah, I could talk about Martin and have talked about Martin for hours. So we're going to move on. But yeah, definitely, this is the one out of all these this week. If you go and find one film, it should be Martin. And it should also be the David Gregory documentary. Our last film, 1966, directed by Samuel Galou. It is called Theater of Death. Christopher Lee is in it. Julian Glover, who has a face that as soon as you see him, you'll recognize him. He was in things like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. He was in Empire Strikes Back. He was in For Your Eyes Only. It's about a theater in Paris who does essentially Grand Guignol. It's theatrical performances of death and murder, and there's a whole history to Grand Guignol that I think is really fascinating. If you do a quick Google search on that, you'll find a wealth of really cool stuff. They kind of alluded to it in the Interview with the Vampire, but yeah, that's a whole other topic. So, a theater of death in Paris specializes in horror presentations. A police surgeon finds himself becoming involved in the place through his attraction to one of the performers. When bloodless bodies start showing up all over town, he realizes that there could be links to the aforementioned theater. If I had to put a name on it, I would say it's a Hammer film. So it's Hammer at the time. 66, right? So the German Krimi film was just migrating over into Italy and then later on into Spain to become Giallo and Gialli. But this is Hammer doing a Giallo film. There's no black glove killer. There's no killer POV, but it has all the earmarkings of a Giallo. Another way I would describe it is Hammer meets Dario Argento with shades of Phantom of the Opera and Picture of Dorian Gray, sort of in the mix. It's way below the radar of British horror. I came upon it a couple episodes back. I talked about this Flesh and Blood, the Hammer history of horror. They mentioned it, and I'd never heard of it. So, of course, me being me, I went out and I found it. Although Christopher Lee has kind of top billing in the film, he disappears about halfway through. He's very much a sort of Svengali role. The picture feels super Italian in a good way. yeah. Lee has this sort of power that isn't explained over certain members of the cast. He does everything except for this, you know what I mean? But the proceedings in the end are kind of long-winded and pedantic. It's, i.e., they're just this side of boring. You want to get to the meat, no pun intended, but the meat of it. But there's a lot of skulking around and a lot of scratching of heads. Overall, I think it's a pretty standard pot boiler. It's fun. Young audiences will grow frustrated pretty quickly. Older audiences will appreciate the mood and the atmosphere and the odd reveal towards the end. But I fear that might come a little too late. The edition I saw there was a brief interview with Christopher Lee at the end, and that was pretty fascinating. But yeah, Theater of Death, it's not up there with the great Hammer films. It's not even up there with the middling Hammer films, but it's a fascinating part of Hammer's output. It's not all Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and Dracula and Frankenstein and that kind of thing. They did a lot of other things. Over the course of a bunch of these episodes here at Carnell Knowledge, I'm attempting to scratch the surface a little bit, bring them out into the light so that you can hear a little bit more about these things, because a common theme around the things I cover here is that no one talks about them. And they should, because they're, again, you have to understand your past to know your future. It's an interesting part of genre, and it's a classic idea of them trying things that might be popular and ultimately weren't. Moving on to our book. Our book is something written by Tom, or edited, I should say, by Tom Deady, D-E-A-D-Y. It's called The Rack. It's from 2024. It's essentially an ode to, some of you might be too young for this, but back in the day, you would go into the drugstore or the grocery store, and there would be a spinner rack. And on the spinner rack was all of these kind of older books, and they all had these lurid covers, and they were monsters and madmen and this kind of a thing. This is kind of an ode to this. I have written here the 20 stories. This is from the back of the book. The 20 stories you're holding are throwbacks to those golden years of horror presented to you by today's brightest stars of the genre. Giant spiders, haunted books, swarms of cicadas, killer bears, chemical spills, and so many more chronicles of carnage in camp. As usual with short story collection, the good, the bad, and the ugly apply. There are some stories on this book that are absolutely fantastic. There are some that are okay, and there's some that just didn't work. There's a lot of suspense stories as opposed to just outright horror, and admittedly, that's splitting a pretty fine hair, but there is a difference. Most of the good things that I found in this volume are available in other collections, better collections, but I get it. You're trying to fill out your roster. You want to use some names, and maybe you take a couple of reprints. And there's nothing wrong with reprints as long as they're not reprinted again and again and again. All right, so that's the book. I have a mediocre recommendation to that. I thought it was a fine read, but it didn't blow my doors off. Let's move on to some records. First record just came out a couple of weeks ago. Ron Carter, the great jazz bassist, and Ricky Dillard, who's a lauded gospel singer and choir and band leader. The album is called Sweet, Sweet Spirit. This, in one of the last episodes I talked about, I drift from things to things, and right now a big thing for me is Southern gospel music. I'm a sucker for a big choir, and boy, gospel music has it in spades. This is a straight up gospel record. If that's something that doesn't float your boat, you can just quickly move on. But you gotta love gospel, and I do. And again, this has a big choir, and the bass playing is just holds that bottom end down and gives everyone a nice solid platform from which to do their thing. It reminded me of things like Kirk Franklin, the great Kirk Franklin, C.C. Winans, Donnie McClurkin, Fred Hammond, Dante Bowe, and the Staple Singers. Again, this is a gospel record. If you're not down with gospel, then that's cool, but don't disparage those that are, like me. Moving on. This from 2012. It just got reissued, as I recall. It's called Solo, 1974 to 1983, The Virgin Years, and it's by Edgar Froese. Edgar Froese was the keyboard player and real leader of Tangerine Dream. That should give you it's a big giveaway of what the record's like. It's very much of the Berlin school. It's Tangerine Dream, it's Johann Schmoling, it's Klaus Schulze, it's that kind of a thing. This is the sound that helped define electronic music. This is more of that smoke 'em if you got 'em kind of stuff. It's very much Tangerine Dream. It reminded me of things like Tangerine Dream, Klaus Schulze, Ashra, Michael Koenig, Steve Roach, and another band that I talked about a few episodes ago called Redshift. I'm a big Edgar Froese fan. I think he does some great work. This is a multi-disc set, so after about your second or third disc of this stuff, you're kind of full. But it's great stuff, and it's a nice, handy way to get a lot of his solo albums in one fell swoop. All right, moving on. 2024, the band is called Lair, Lair. The album is called NGELAR, NGELAR. It's from West Java, Indonesia. Go Kurosawa is in this band. He is from a great sort of stoner, psychedelic, modern band called Kikugaku Moyo, which I'm a big fan of. Can't believe I haven't covered any of those guys, but perhaps I will. It's very ethnic sounding, but it's still modern. It's wholly enjoyable. Psychedelic, yet traditional. There are aspects of both modern music, but also traditional Indonesian music. As a result of all that, there's a different application of songwriting that is, it's really interesting. It reminded me, the names I wrote down as I was listening were Sven Wonder, Project Gemini, Yako Gardner, Sundancer, Melting Minds, and the aforementioned Kikugaku Moyo. Great stuff. It's not like what you're probably used to listening to, but that's okay. I believe in you, and I think that you will really dig this. Moving on to a 2016 record. It's the self-titled record by a band called the Olympians. And it kind of pisses me off that without... no, I take that back. That's our next band. Never mind what I just said. These guys are from New York. World music, horn heavy, down tempo with a nostalgic aesthetic. This is vintage, soulful music. It's like a soundtrack from a late 70s blaxploitation film. A lot of wah-wah pedal, if you know what I'm saying. Reminded me of things like Manam Street Band, El Michaels Affair, the Buddha's Band, Khruangbin, Arc de Sol, Balthus, Surprise Chef, and Orion's Belt. Great record, has a great cover, immediately drew me in. I forget how this came across my desk, but the second I put it on, I was hooked, and I was down with all of it. It's a great record. Again, the Olympians. Again, check it out. It's good stuff. Take my word for it. Or go to the description. I have links to all this stuff. YouTube playlists to these entire records that you can go to and listen for yourself and decide if I'm full of shit or not. Our last record. Now, this is the one that kind of pissed me off, and I'll tell you, it's not because of the record. The group is called Theodor, Theodor. The album is called Holocene. I think they're a French band. This was released in 2024. As I was pulling these albums together for this show, I inadvertently went and checked, and these guys were I live in a small town, and they just were here playing at a small club it's a perfect venue to see a band. I saw those Straight Jackets there, and it was the band, me, my wife, and maybe 2 or 3 other people. But yeah, and I missed it, and I'm pretty ticked about it. The band was founded on a road trip through Italy. The music is very psychedelic / sweet soul. Dreamy keys, playful bass, acoustic drums, 80-inspired synths. Very, very enjoyable. They're a good band. This is a great record. Again, check it out. You're going to love it. It reminded me of things like Offline, Cousin Kula, early Air, if we know who Air is. It's like their earlier stuff. It reminded me a lot of that. Very warm, groove-driven soul. Good stuff all the way around. And that's it. That's it for Friday. I appreciate, I'm growing a little long. I appreciate everyone who tunes in. I really appreciate it if you've subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It helps me out. And like the video, ring the bell, all of that stuff. But if you would please share the episodes to your social media, that would be doing me a big solid. I'm not sure what I got happening. If there's going to be a Saturday show, a Saturday what I call weekend special. I got a lot of stuff, a lot of those planned. I have a lot of stuff happening here, and what I'm trying to do is keep the Monday, Wednesday, Friday shows to sort of this format, and then if I drop a Saturday show, it'll be more of a deep dive into one topic or another. All right, that's going to do it. Thank you so much. I hope you have a really great weekend, and until I see you on Monday, take care.